Alright, Trickies and Trickers, now it's time to take a look at the second episode of the day, The Abandoned. In Quarks, Okolar is making a killing at the Dabo table. He is about to leave the table a winner when Marda, the Dabo girl, entices him to make one final and losing spin at the wheel. Marda leaves the Dabo table and walks over to a nearby table in the bar where Jake is seated, and she explains that Jake's father has invited her to dinner on the following evening in the Cisco's quarters, which startles Jake. However, he quips and says it'll be great, and then Marda will enjoy the food. Just then, Quark is at the bar, when a boss-like captain walks up behind him and the two start negotiating the sale of salvage from the Gamma Quadrant. She wins the negotiations after putting her feminine charms to effective use, though Quark is initially not interested in purchasing junk. Next, Quark is in a cargo bay, rummaging through the salvage he bought for 3 bars of latinum. After a few moments, he hears the cries of a baby, and walks towards the source of the noise, only to discover Stasis' chamber, which holds the crying baby. No, 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 he mutters to himself. In the infirmary, Quark is with Dr. Bashir and Commander Sisko, and the infant is lying on a bio-bed. Sisko braces Quark for failing to inspect the salvage before purchasing it, and just then Dax walks into the infirmary to announce the chances of finding the boss of Captain approach nil. In her flight plan, she planned heading for Risa, but Dax does not think they should put too much faith in that. Dr. Bashir, meanwhile, tells Sisko that the infant is growing at rates Bashir has never seen outside of a laboratory, and that the infant ought to be kept on hand for more medical tests. Sisko then asks about the salvage, and Dax replies that O'Brien will be examining it. Quark offers a fruitless protest against the sequestering of his property, and probably leaves the infirmary when Sisko shoots him a look. Before Dax and Sisko leave the infirmary, Sisko picks up the infant to hold him, and Dax offers to find an orphanage on Bajor for the infant. Shortly thereafter, Sisko gives up the infant to Dr. Bashir and leaves the infirmary with Dax, who teases him about the change in his demeanor when he was holding the baby. Sisko then explains he actually feels nostalgia for Jake's early childhood, notwithstanding the hassles of fatherhood, because he misses the days when it was easy to make Jake happy. Sisko then returns to his quarters, where Jake is writing on a pad while lying on the sofa. He asks Jake for a hug, but Jake turns away and expresses dismay at the fact that his father gave so little warning on the plans he made with Marda. The commander excuses himself by pointing out that some time ago, he threatened to invite Marda to dinner if Jake didn't, and Jake backs down, reminding them both that it will be just dinner. Sometime later, Commander Sisko enters the infirmary, where Bashir announces that the child taken from salvage is not a baby anymore. Sisko then looks through a nearby doorway, only to see a child on a table who appears to be 8 or 9 years old. Bashir then explains that tests revealed the boy to be no more than 2 weeks old. In fact, which is mystifying since the only organisms ordinarily capable of growing as fast as this boy are small and simple, not anything complex as a humanoid. The boy chooses at that moment to announce clearly that he is hungry, which Bashir says is no surprise. Sisko introduces himself and Bashir to the boy, tells him that they are on a space station, and asks the boy if he knows what he is. He replies, "No, but I want to learn." Sisko and Bashir then go into the next room, where Bashir explains that the only rational explanation for what they are seeing is some sort of advanced genetic engineering. Next, Sisko goes to the cargo bay containing the salvage, where O'Brien explains the stasis chamber, which implies that someone wanted to foresell the boy's maturation while aboard the ship. It says that the wreckage was likely some sort of transport. Before Sisko leaves the cargo bay, he asks O'Brien to spare someone to give the replicators in his quarters some attention, and O'Brien says they hear from Jake about Commander Sisko's dinner invitation to Marda. Sisko expresses reservations about the fact that his 16-year-old son is romantically involved with a 20-year-old Dabo girl. He defies to O'Brien that in the face of his discomfort, he wanted to see what he was up against. O'Brien asks, "What if it turns out you like her?" Sisko answers that he doesn't want to like her. Next, Mitra cares at the entrance to Odo's new quarters with a plant in hand. She offers her plant to Odo, which he kisses for the sake of decoration. He thanks her with his typical reserved tone, and shares a supposition that she would like to see his quarters. She says, "Everyone wants to see her quarters. It's called curiosity." They go in, and Odo tells Kara that he's not finished setting things up. He's just started turning this space into a place where he can truly explore what it means to be a shapeshifter. Kara points out that he doesn't need an entire set of quarters just to sit in his bucket. He knows that he doesn't need the bucket anymore, but that he keeps as a memento to remind himself of the life he led before getting his own quarters. He then goes on to explain that with the new space, he can more easily regenerate and explore his true nature in private, which she's scared to catch herself and apologize for intruding on Odo's personal space. Odo brushes off her apology and says that she's always welcome in his quarters. Aww. Kira then looks around and asks where they should put the plant she brought. Odo walks over to his bug and puts a plant into that, which Kira says is perfect. Later, Bashir and Dax are in the Replimat, where Bashir's explained that the boy is missing critical enzyme, notwithstanding the fact that he's genetically engineered. Bashir can't understand why someone would be engineered to have such an obvious flaw. At that moment, Bashir is asked to come to the infirmary immediately, and there is disruption on the promenade. The boy, who is now an apparently teenage humanoid, is stalking around, causing people to back away in apprehension. Bashir tries to pacify him by saying no one's going to hurt you, but the boy punches him in the face. Dax taps her comm badge and calls security, and then Odo steps out of his office, ordering the boy to stop. As the boy runs down the promenade, Odo blocks his path and changes to an amorphous but upright form just as the boy collides with him. When Odo reassumes his humanoid form, the boy is on his knees, looking at Odo in a state of obvious distress, but also reverence. At that point, Dax calls Sisko on her comm badge and tells him, "I think we saw the mystery of our young visitor, Benjamin. He's a Jem'Hadar." In the wardroom, Odo, Kira, Dax, and Bashir are waiting when Commander Sisko comes into the room and announces that orders from Starfleet, the Jem'Hadar is to be taken to Starbase 201 for research purposes. Kira agrees enthusiastically, but Odo is not pleased, knowing from personal experience that the Jem'Hadar will be nothing more than a well-treated specimen when Starfleet gets their hands on him. Bashir sides with Odo, arguing the boy is a sentient life form, not some random genetic sample to study. Kira points out that all of the genetic engineering that's gone into him, the Jem'Hadar may be nothing more than a killing machine. At that point, Odo takes personal responsibility for the Jem'Hadar, insisting as a changeling he's the best person to find out the Jem'Hadar's makeup will or not allow him free will as a normal sentient life form would exercise it. At that point, Commander Sisko asks to speak with Odo privately. Once they're alone, Sisko points out to Odo that there's no real obligation on Odo's part to make up for for things that the Founders did to this Jem'Hadar, but Odo stands fast, pointing out again that he knows what it means to be a research subject against his will, and that he doesn't want to inflict that on the Jem'Hadar. Commander Sisko sees and promises to temporize with Starfleet, but reminds Odo to be careful. In security, Jem'Hadar is flinging himself against the force field of holding his cell, while Bashir is attempting to explain to the Jem'Hadar its need for the enzyme that Bashir explained to Dax in the Replimat. Just then Odo walks in. The Jem'Hadar demands to be left alone, then takes a step back when he sees Odo, who orders the force field lowered and says, "Everything is under control now." Odo orders Jem'Hadar to sit down and asks about his condition. Jem'Hadar admits to being nauseous and in pain, while Bashir explains the missing enzyme. Bashir goes on to say he'd like to perform more tests with the goal of replicating the enzyme. The Jem'Hadar first refuses, but is persuaded by Odo to change his mind. Bashir then leaves, and Odo asks the Jem'Hadar what he wants to do, which is to fight, as it turns out, not with Odo, but instead with the others on the station, and it appears that anyone will do. The Jem'Hadar asks if what he wants is wrong, and Odo tells him that they need to find other interests for the Jem'Hadar to pursue. Odo asks the Jem'Hadar to relax, to smile, and demonstrates to the confused Jem'Hadar what a smile is. The Jem'Hadar attempts to mimic Odo, but what comes across his face is more of a grimace, and Odo says, "We'll work on that." Meanwhile, at Commander Sisko's quarters, the dinner appointment with Marta is just beginning. Jake insists that while the food may be spicy, she'll enjoy it, as Commander Sisko brings the last of the serving dishes to the table and seats himself. He asks Marta to tell him about herself. She explains that her parents were killed during the occupation, that she was brought up by neighbors until she was 13, and that she went out on her own thereafter. She goes on to say that she has a brother and sister named Sergeno and Corin, but that she hasn't spoken to them in years, apparently because they took issue with her decision to work as a dapple girl. She closes by pointing out that it's amazing how some people judge others based on profession as opposed to character. And just then Jake throws a "see, I told you so" glance at his father. They go on to discuss writing, Jake's in particular. Marta says that his poetry won her over. She also announces that Jake's quite the dumb-jawed hustler, which takes his father by surprise. Jake then excuses himself from the room, and after Marta points out that Jake is more than meets the eye, she and Commander Sisko agree that they have in common the fact that they both care a great deal about Jake. The smile on Commander Sisko's face suggests that he might just be warming up to Marta after all. Later, Odo and O'Brien are in the cargo hold containing the salvage in which the Jem'Hadar was found. O'Brien shows Odo an artifact which justifies analysis. Odo suggests the artifact is like a respiratory for vials of the Jem'Hadar's missing enzyme, and goes on to say that this genetically engineered addiction is probably another mechanism for ensuring the loyalty of the Jem'Hadar to the Founders. O'Brien tells Odo that he finds this cold-blooded, and Odo reminds the chief that he does not have blood. O'Brien looks at Odo with awkward silence when he continues to examine the artifact. Odo takes the vials to the infirmary, and Bashir Sassabraz delivers some of their contents to the Jem'Hadar's carotid artery. After a few moments, the Jem'Hadar announces that the result of this treatment is positive, and Odo starts to leave, only to be asked by the Jem'Hadar if he can come along. The two of them go to Odo's quarters. Odo explains how he mimics the objects in the room as a way of honing his shape-shifting abilities. He then says that taking human form is especially difficult, and the Jem'Hadar asks why he bothers, since changelings are better than humanoids, including himself. Odo rejects that assertion, saying that the changelings are not better than humanoids, just different, and that Jem'Hadar's instincts lead him wrongly. In confusion, the Jem'Hadar announces that Odo must be right, and Odo's response is that the Jem'Hadar must learn to think for himself, to make decisions based on his own needs and desires, rather than those of the changelings, and then asks what the boy wants. It turns out that the Jem'Hadar wants to find his people, and Odo says that he understands that very well, adding that what he found was not very pleasant. Odo then shows the Jem'Hadar footage from the boarding of the USS Defiant during his previous journey through the Gamma Quadrant. The Jem'Hadar fixes on the playback, saying that the men attacking the Defiant's bridge and crew are his people. Odo confirms this, adding, "They're a race of brutal warriors." Odo then tells the Jem'Hadar that he does not need to be brutal, since there are other ways to work out his aggression. The two of them then go to a holosuite, where Odo has created an adversary for the Jem'Hadar to fight, with the understanding that outside a holosuite, the Jem'Hadar must retain himself from aggression. Odo starts the holosuite program, and after a few moments the Jem'Hadar kills his adversary and asks Odo to increase the skill of his opponent. Odo does so, and the program restarts. While the fighting continues, Kira walks into the holosuite and asks to speak with Odo. The two of them leave, but the holosuite is left in frame, where the Jem'Hadar increases the difficulty of the level of the program from 3 to 5. On the mezzanine of Quarks, Kira is beside herself at the news that Odo has allowed the Jem'Hadar to move in with him. Odo says that it's all right, that the Jem'Hadar trusts him. Kira is unconvinced. "But can you trust him?" she asks, wondering if the Jem'Hadar can be controlled indefinitely. Odo says he's not trying to control anyone, but instead is trying to give the Jem'Hadar a third option apart from being sequestered in the laboratory or fight alongside the other Jem'Hadar. Kira is still skeptical, pointing out that Jem'Hadar is a custom-designed killing machine. Odo offers a rebuttal by pointing out that in certain ways both he and Kira are acting contrary to their own typical inclinations. Kira ultimately relents. Like Commander Sisko in the wardroom, she tenderly asks Odo to be careful. Odo then goes back to the holosuite, orders the program discontinued, and takes the Jem'Hadar out onto the promenade. Once out of the promenade, the Jem'Hadar remarks that the onlookers are afraid of him, and Odo adds that they are curious and afraid. The Jem'Hadar suggests that they should be afraid, because he can kill any of them, and Odo asks if he's capable of thinking of anything else. "I don't think so," the Jem'Hadar replies. Odo goes on to say there are plenty of other things to experience, but the Jem'Hadar is unimpressed, and just as he's about to explain his attitude, Commander Sisko orders Odo to come to his office. Odo orders the Jem'Hadar back to his quarters. Once Odo is in Sisko's office, Sisko explains that Starfleet is coming for the boy in a matter of hours whether Odo likes it or not, in spite of any agreements that have been made. At that moment, the Jem'Hadar steps out of camouflage and points a phaser at Sisko, insisting he'll be sent anywhere at the demands of Starfleet. The Jem'Hadar demands a runabout, and says that Odo will come along since the inhabitants of deep space are not his people either. Odo agrees and promises that nobody will interfere with them. The Jem'Hadar promises he will kill anyone who does attempt to interfere. When they reach the docking wing of the station, Odo and Jem'Hadar debate the latter's course of action, but the Jem'Hadar cannot be restrained from his objective. He's a Jem'Hadar, he wants to be with his people, and there is nothing to debate. The Jem'Hadar goes on to assert that Odo's time with other humanoids has done something to him, and finally says, "I don't know what the other changelings are like, but I know they're not like you." When Odo and the Jem'Hadar arrive at the airlock, they find Commander Sisko waiting for them with a security team, but Odo asks Cisco to back down, saying that the Jem'Hadar will be lethal trouble aboard ship, and that he will not keep Odo from coming back to the station. Cisco lets him go, and promises to hold the fire off of Starfleet, knowing that Admiral Chev would not like this. On the promenade, O'Brien asks Cisco why he isn't ordering Jake to end his relationship with Marta. Cisco tells him that dinner with the two of them granted him new insights about his son, but warning the chief not to get into any games at Dumb Job with Jake. Later, Kira's sitting at a table bringing out some pads in the rebel mat. When Odo walks up to her. "About the boy," he says to her. "You were right." Aww. So let's take a look at some trivia surrounding this episode. Bumper Robinson will later voice the Jem'Hadar in Star Trek Online. This episode marks the first time the nature of Ketracel White is detailed, even though it is only referred to as the missing enzyme that the Jem'Hadar are addicted to. Odo's placing the plant from Kira in his bucket, which used to reside while in his gelatinous state, is symbolic of his feelings for her. She had always had a special place in his heart. The symbolic importance of the bucket housing this plant is revisited in season 4 episode Crossfire, when, after learning that Kira doesn't love him, and instead is in love with Shakaar, Odo picks up the bucket and smashes it against the wall. Footage from the scene in which Odo uses his bucket for the flowers is incorporated into the montage at the end of What You Leave Behind. The weapon used by the Allisons Jem'Hadar in the holosuite scene is similar in design to the Ushantor used in the Enterprise Season 4 episode United. Odo replaced part of the battle scene from The Surge Part 1, which establishes that it took place on Stardate 48214.5, with the onboard battle occurring on time at Dex 310. In this episode, Cisco fulfills his promise to Jake, made in the Season 2 episode Playing God, telling him to bring Marta home for dinner. Leslie Bevis made her second appearance as Rionja, the Boswick freighter captain in this episode. She previously appeared in the Season 2 episode The Homecoming and will later appear in the Season 4 finale Broken Link, where a character would be named. This is the first episode to refer to Jake's literary talents, foreshadowing his later decision to become a writer/journalist. The events of the Voyager pilot episode Caretaker take place between this episode and the next one, judging from the star dates. Tom Walker's costume was sold off on the Insta-Wrap sale and auction on eBay. The scene where Odo attempts to get the Jem'Hadar to smile is reminiscent of a similar scene from Terminator 2, in which John Connor tries to get the T-800 to smile, also with limited success. So I actually really kind of like this episode, and again, I actually kind of prefer the A story over the B story, so yeah. So overall, I give The Abandoned 3 warp cores out of 5. Well, anyway, tune in a bit as we take a look at next episode, Civil Defense. So, until then, live long and prosper, everybody.